Most people overlook a sacred window that opens each night, the brief passage between wakefulness and sleep. It seems ordinary, even meaningless, yet it holds immense transformative power. Carl Jung identified this as a liminal space, a transitional threshold where the conscious mind begins to fade and the unconscious rises quietly to the surface. Here, the ego no longer dominates, and the self, the deeper core of our being, begins to speak in symbols, sensations, and truth. It's in this precise moment that real transmutation becomes possible, not through effort, but through intention and surrender. Yet so many fall asleep in silent war with themselves. Guilt, regret, anxiety, these emotions aren't left behind with the day. They're carried into sleep like hidden toxins replaying in the background while the body rests. And the unconscious, always receptive, takes these final impressions as instruction. What we whisper before we sleep becomes the blueprint for how we wake. This isn't just psychology, it's energetic architecture. When fear is the last message, the unconscious answers with chaos. When resentment lingers, it builds inner resistance. Without knowing, we reinforce cycles of emotional scarcity night after night. But it doesn't have to be this way. Jung taught that the unconscious responds not to logic or command, but to symbols and sincerity. This is where intention becomes everything. A few words spoken with presence and emotional truth can become anchors of transformation. They bypass the defensive ego and speak directly to the symbolic mind. And in this space, just before sleep, what you say becomes sacred. It's not about reciting magic spells. It's about making a spiritual offering, planting seeds of peace and clarity into the soil of your inner world. This is the foundation of inner wealth. By choosing to speak from acceptance, trust, and gratitude before sleeping, we don't just quiet the mind. We shift our emotional frequency. We tell the unconscious, I am ready to receive, to heal, to transform. And the response is subtle but real. You begin to sleep deeper, wake clearer, think with more discernment. Over time, your nights stop being escapes and start becoming rituals of conscious restoration. Prosperity isn't always built during the day. Sometimes it begins with a whisper in the dark, and so rest becomes more than recovery. It becomes alignment. The moment before sleep, once ignored, becomes a ceremony, small, private, sacred. You're not just ending a day. You're crossing into a temple within, guided not by control but by presence. And in this presence, real change begins, not as a loud revolution, but as a quiet return to your true self. What if 7 simple words, spoken with awareness right before you sleep, held the power to rewire your entire emotional foundation around prosperity? Not as a mystical formula, but as a conscious tool for reshaping the internal beliefs that guide your external life. Carl Jung believed that transformation doesn't begin with force or logic. It begins with symbols, with rituals, with gestures that speak to the deeper language of the unconscious. The words you whisper at night aren't just thoughts, they're impressions. And these impressions, when repeated, become blueprints. They tell your unconscious what kind of life you're available for. Prosperity, after all, begins as a psychological orientation before it becomes a material reality. Most people end their day with loops of stress, lack, or overthinking. They unknowingly imprint scarcity onto the deepest layers of their mind. But you have another option. You can choose words that invite abundance instead of anxiety. These 7 aren't just affirmations, they are a sequence of internal alignment. I release starts the process, letting go of tension, fear, and self-judgment. Then, I align draws your attention back to your soul's compass. I trust dissolves the compulsion to control, opening space for divine timing. Each phrase isn't a goal, it's a key, a signal to your unconscious that you're stepping into a new state of being. Next comes I receive, an act of radical openness. Prosperity can't flow where there's resistance, and receiving is an act of permission. Then, I grow, affirms that even in discomfort, you are expanding. Growth is wealth. With I create, you activate the archetype of the inner alchemist, shaping meaning from chaos and claiming authorship of your journey. Finally, I am ready grounds the ritual. It tells your unconscious, I've cleared the path, I've aligned my will, and now I welcome what's next. These 7 words, in this specific order, form a symbolic bridge between your conscious desire and your unconscious programming. Spoken consistently before sleep, they begin to dissolve the internal noise that keeps you stuck. You may not feel a shift on the first night, but the unconscious listens. Over time, your dreams will shift. Your reactions will soften. You'll stop clinging and start allowing. You'll move from effort to flow. This isn't just positive thinking, it's disciplined reprogramming. Each repetition is a symbolic offering to your deeper self. You're not begging for results. You're declaring, I am a vessel for abundance and I act accordingly, even when no one's watching. So pause and ask yourself, what energy have you been carrying into sleep? Has your mind been rehearsing fear, failure, or confusion? Or are you now ready to imprint the truth of your higher identity? These 7 words are more than just language. They are energetic decisions. Spoken with presence, they don't just help you sleep better. They awaken a deeper rhythm within, a rhythm of alignment, creation, and quiet power. And that's how prosperity begins, in silence with intention in the final breath of the day. Your subconscious doesn't need complexity, it needs consistency. Carl Jung emphasized that the unconscious is moved not by intellect, but by symbols and emotional resonance. When you speak with honesty and presence, the unconscious listens. It doesn't analyze, it absorbs. And the final words you offer before sleep sink deeper than any thought you think during the day. That's why the 7-word ritual matters. You're not speaking to impress your mind, you're speaking to instruct your subconscious. Every night you either feed the inner world with clarity or confusion, intention or noise. People often seek external strategies to improve their lives, books, courses, new habits. But they overlook the simplest power, what they whisper to themselves when no one is watching. The words you plant before sleep are not a performance, they're programming. And over time, the subconscious begins to obey that script. If your script is rooted in lack, the unconscious responds with scarcity. But when your nightly words are built on surrender, alignment, and readiness, the subconscious begins to reflect prosperity, not just in emotion but in behavior, perception, and response. This isn't about quick fixes, it's about emotional architecture. Each word, I release, I align, I trust, is like a beam placed in the foundation of your inner life. These phrases aren't random, they're archetypal. They mirror the stages of real transformation, letting go of what no longer serves, recalibrating to inner truth, and stepping into creative responsibility. Jung believed that the unconscious holds the blueprint of your soul. When you speak to it with reverence, you awaken the part of you that already knows the path, even if your conscious mind doesn't. And here's the turning point. The subconscious doesn't distinguish between inner and outer reality. It acts on the emotional truth you give it. If you speak as a creator, it organizes your world accordingly. If you declare readiness, it opens doors, not because of wishful thinking, but because your perception sharpens, your reactions align, and your decisions begin to reflect inner certainty. This is not control. It's co-creation, a sacred dance between intention and intuition. So tonight, don't just fall asleep. Initiate something. Let your final words carry weight. Make them a declaration, not a routine. The language of the subconscious is emotion, repetition, and presence. And with every night you speak with awareness, you reinforce not just a new habit, but a new identity. One that's ready for prosperity, not someday, but now. There's a kind of wealth that doesn't begin with income or opportunity. It begins with peace. Not surface-level calm, but a deep inner silence born from alignment. And that peace isn't found in the morning rush or evening routines. It's built in the moments just before sleep. Carl Jung understood that the way we end the day defines the quality of our inner life. Falling asleep in resentment or anxiety creates inner tension, but choosing to sleep in peace is a form of mental discipline, a conscious act of reclaiming authority over your emotional state. And few practices are more powerful than this one. You don't need hours of meditation or the perfect environment. You need a few honest words, spoken with presence. The 7-word ritual isn't a trick. It's a doorway. With each phrase, you strip away noise, lower resistance, and speak directly to the essence of who you are. Saying "I release" doesn't erase the past. It simply removes its grip. Saying "I align" doesn't guarantee clarity. It sets the intention for it. These words are like turning down the volume of the world so the soul can finally speak. When repeated, night after night, this ritual does more than calm you. It changes you. The subconscious begins to understand. We're no longer at war. There's no need to protect through overthinking, shame, or fear. We're moving in a new direction, one led by inner stability, not emotional chaos. Over time, this shift becomes a foundation. You begin to notice your reactivity softens, your sleep deepens, and your mornings feel lighter. Not because life outside changed, but because your energy within became coherent. This is where transformation begins, not in noise, but in stillness. Jung believed the unconscious responds most clearly when the ego steps aside. And that's exactly what sleep offers, a chance to hand the reins to a wiser part of you. But to do that, you must approach it intentionally. The ritual becomes more than repetition. It becomes a pact. You're saying, "Tonight I choose peace. I trust the process. I allow my healing." And even if your life feels uncertain, this one gesture reminds your psyche that order can be restored from within. So the question isn't whether this works, it's whether you'll show up. Will you give yourself permission to shift? Will you speak to your unconscious like it matters? Because it does. The way you end your day is a mirror of how you relate to yourself. And each night is an invitation to either repeat the past or rewire your path forward. Repetition, when charged with emotion and intention, becomes more than a habit. It becomes a signal. Carl Jung called this symbolic repetition a psychic imprint. Every night you speak the same words with presence. You're not just calming your thoughts. You're sending a clear, consistent message to the unconscious. This is who I am becoming. Over time, the unconscious starts to respond, not just with dreams, but with alignment. You begin to experience subtle shifts in how you feel, what you attract, and how life flows around you. This isn't magic. It's the psychology of resonance in action. That's where synchronicity enters, the outer confirmation of inner alignment. Jung taught that when the unconscious is activated with intention, the world starts to mirror that energy. You begin to notice signs, timely meetings, unexpected clarity. Emotions that once overwhelmed you now feel manageable. Why? Because you've made a silent agreement with yourself. You're no longer drifting. You're directing. And those 7 words? They are the signature of that internal pact. A personal contract to live with truth, intention, and openness to growth. When you repeat, "I release, I align, I trust, I receive, I grow, I create, I am ready," you're not speaking to the outside world. You're speaking to the source within. Each word reverberates into the structures of your subconscious, softening fear and reinforcing the foundation of a new identity. You become less reactive, more discerning, less desperate, more available. You begin to act from wholeness instead of scarcity. And that shift doesn't go unnoticed. Your environment starts to respond in kind. If your energy shifts, your life shifts. What once felt heavy becomes neutral. What once seemed impossible begins to unfold naturally. This is what happens when symbolic repetition meets soul alignment. It's not about control. It's about coherence. And each time you choose these 7 words over mental noise, you step deeper into your authentic self, into the part of you that remembers what peace feels like. So tonight, make a declaration. Write this in the comments and let it echo in your life. Tonight, I choose to sleep with discipline and faith. Let that be your first act of prosperity, not waiting for results but claiming your readiness to grow. That's where change begins, not in outcomes but in intention. Night doesn't just bring rest, it brings revelation. When the world goes quiet, the inner world gets louder. And if we're brave enough to listen, we begin to hear what daylight hides: our fears, our desires, our shadow. Carl Jung taught that the shadow isn't evil, it's simply unacknowledged. It's the part of us we deny, repress, or avoid. But when you create space for stillness, especially before sleep, the shadow begins to soften. Not because it disappears, but because you've stopped fighting it. And that's the beginning of healing. Not resistance, but recognition. The 7-word ritual works because it doesn't force healing. It invites it. I release gives the shadow permission to speak without judgment. I align calls your fragmented parts back into center. And I trust silences the fearful narrative that says you must fix everything before you rest. These aren't just calming phrases. They're symbolic acts of integration. You're telling your unconscious, I see you, I'm not afraid of you, I'm ready to learn. And that honesty is what allows deeper transformation to begin. Sleep in this sense becomes sacred, not just a break from the day, but a reunion with the soul. Jung believed that dreams are the unconscious speaking in symbols. And when you end your day with ritual and intention, your dreams become more than chaos. They become guidance, clarity, even prophecy. But only when the ego steps aside. That's why your final words of the night matter so much. They are your offering to the unconscious, a way of saying, I'm no longer at war with myself. And the more you practice this, the more your outer world begins to mirror this inner coherence. You may not see dramatic changes overnight, but you'll feel subtle shifts, less reactivity, more groundedness, clearer boundaries, deeper compassion. These are signs that the unconscious has received your message, and that it's responding not with noise but with balance. So let the night become your teacher. Let sleep be your temple. And let your last words each evening be a sacred pact, not just to rest, but to return to yourself. The real you, the whole you. The one who doesn't chase prosperity, but embodies it in stillness. Maybe no one will notice that something shifted in you, but you will. You'll feel it in your breath, your reactions, your energy. You'll realize you're no longer trying to fix everything overnight. You're simply meeting yourself with truth. And that's where real change starts. Not with pressure, but with presence. Carl Jung said that healing begins when we stop abandoning ourselves. So tonight, instead of escaping into sleep, return. Speak your words, honor your journey, and allow the unconscious to do what it does best. Respond in silence with wisdom. Now, if this message touched something in you, don't let it fade. Subscribe to the channel, give this video a like, and watch the next one that's appearing on your screen. It was chosen for you, not randomly, but as the next step in your journey. Your inner transformation doesn't end here. It's just beginning. And you deserve to walk it with presence, power, and peace.